So where is this? Where is the black book now?
The FBI has it. The FBI did a sting. Alfredo Rodriguez, we talked about a little bit earlier. He wanted to sell the black book to one of the attorneys that was launching civil suits at Jeffrey Epstein that was representing some of the victims. And he called the attorney, and the attorney called the FBI, and the FBI did a sting. And so the FBI has the black book. I was fortunate enough to get a copy of it. And then that was the copy that I released in 2015.
So the FBI has the black book. They've done nothing with it.
Well, no one's done it. Here's Epstein's. When Epstein got taken down 4 years ago, the FBI opened his safe, and he had hundreds of DVDs, and I'm sure a bunch of them had to do with compromising. And then I think he was also into child pornography too. So we have no idea.
So they have all the DVDs.
They have all the DVDs.
They have the black book. They literally have everything. Nothing is happening. What's your opinion of the FBI nowadays?
Well, I mean, it's in this case, it's obviously unbelievably corrupt. The FBI knew. Okay, so the FBI knew about Jeffrey Epstein in 1996. We know that for a fact. Maria Farmer, who was assaulted by Jeffrey Epstein, and her sister was assaulted by Jeffrey Epstein, went to the FBI in 1996 and told them about Jeffrey Epstein. Now, and it's amazing. Think if the FBI had acted on Maria Farmer's information. Think of all those girls that could have been saved. But
I don't even know why anybody who has, I can't even imagine applying for a position at the FBI nowadays. Well, I don't understand what they do, and I don't understand any red-blooded, whatever, anybody with an ounce of integrity in this country. I do not understand what the they are doing working for the FBI. I don't know what they do now.
And, you know,
except cover-ups. They do a lot of cover-ups.
I have met some decent FBI agents over the years. I mean, I have.
Who are they serving?
I don't know.
You know, that's what, like, you think you're doing something for the better, like, for the good of the country?
But we're talking,
disgusting.
You know, we're talking the Department of Justice and the FBI together. I mean, so the FBI had hundreds of DVDs of Epstein. I'm sure a lot of them were compromised DVDs, and I'm sure a lot of them were just child pornography. So they've gone into a black hole.
I mean, it's, you know, we talked earlier, and it's these guys, they're worried about their mortgage and their car payment and this and that. And it's like, sell your f***ing car, get a smaller house. What expense are you willing to cover these f***ers up for? You know, there's kids being raped.
It's
f*** your car. Get a new job.
But, you know, people do not think that way. They, like I said, they're afraid of losing what they have or not getting what they want. But now this is interesting. So when Epstein died, they said that the case was closed. So I did a Freedom of Information Act request. I didn't ask for the DVDs. I asked for reports on the DVDs. That was my FOIA request. And I eventually got an email back saying that the case was ongoing. So I don't know if those reports on those DVDs will ever come out. It would be great. I mean, then we'd be able to get a lot of answers. It's up to our government. Our government needs to get honest about this. And until it does, I mean, we're going to be governed by the cesspool that we're currently being governed by. People that aren't concerned about doing the right thing. They're concerned about their money and prestige. And you see this, I mean, it's a historical trend. I mean, like the Catholic Church, Penn State, you know, Boy Scouts, money, property, and prestige. They will not, all those kids that were molested, all those kids, molestations that got covered up, they were all covered up so those organizations could perpetuate their money, their power, and their prestige. And individuals are the same way.
Let's talk about Maxwell. How did she play into everything? What was her role?
Well, she was the one that was really hands-on running the network, the logistics person. I interviewed an Israeli spy, Ari Ben Menashe, on my podcast. And, he's a spy. It's difficult to know if he's telling the truth or not. But, okay, so her father, Robert Maxwell, had a publishing empire. But he was also a spy for Israel and Russia and the UK and probably the US. And he had this huge publishing empire. And what he did was he went into the retirement funds of his employees and stole them all.
So Maxwell's dad was an Israeli spy.
Yes.
Who was running logistics for Jeffrey Epstein.
No. So he was a spy for sure. And then he had a huge publishing empire.
But his daughter was running logistics for Jeffrey
Epstein, yes.
Who has been named by government officials that he's untouchable because he's in intelligence.
Yes.
So there's a line
There's
right
a nexus there, yeah. And Maxwell had a yacht called Lady Ghislaine, which was named after his daughter, Ghislaine, who was his favorite child. And he jumped off one day, and he had a very mysterious death, much like Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the cover story on it is that, because it did come out that he'd ripped off all these, the retirement funds of all these employees. Millions of dollars. He destroyed all these people. A guy obviously didn't have a conscience. And Ghislaine Maxwell supposedly then came to New York to get away from it. And then that's where she met Jeffrey Epstein. Now, according to this Israeli spy that I interviewed, Robert Maxwell put Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein together. And they were together even before he died, before his mysterious death. Some people think it's suicide. Some people think it's homicide. It's a very strange death. So somehow Maxwell and Epstein got together. And the story is that Epstein had the money and Maxwell had the connections. And I think that there's some truth there.
And this guy was a spy for the Israelis, the UK, and possibly the US, and I believe you named another one.
And possibly Russia, yeah.
And do all these countries have people involved in this trafficking ring?
With Jeffrey Epstein, it's really difficult to know. Jeffrey Epstein was active in Europe, for sure. He was actually buying. We're not talking renting. He was buying young girls in Eastern Europe. Buying them like slaves.
Yeah.
And when you think about that, how evil that is.
We've covered this in other episodes about how trafficking works. But I believe you mentioned something about were there members in the UK government involved or within the royal family?
Okay, so definitely Prince Andrew was part of. He was pandering. Epstein was pandering girls to Prince Andrew, and who is a thoroughly repulsive human being. I did some research into him, and anybody that ever worked for the royal family loathes Prince Andrew.
What was he into? What was his deal?
He liked underage girls. That was his thing. But he's just a nasty, foul human being. I think a lot of the people in the royal family are probably nasty, foul human beings. I think Andrew is probably a little special that way. He's probably a little nastier and more foul than his siblings. Because just from, and this is very strange. So here's a guy that molests underage girls, but he has all these teddy bears. And the butler, or whoever takes care of the house manager where he lives, they're supposed to have the teddy bears on his bed in a certain way. And if the teddy bears aren't on his bed the way that he likes them, then he has a conniption. So he likes to molest little girls, and then he likes teddy bears on a certain way on his bed. So that's kind of, and according to Andrew, he doesn't sweat either, according to the BBC interview. So, which really, I mean, there was that BBC interview where he attempted to acquit himself, and he came across as such an idiot. I mean, you could tell that it's like Jamie Dimon with J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan just gave Epstein's victims $290 million.
Yeah. And
there was a New York Times article where Jamie Dimon was talking, and you could tell that the guy was lying. I mean, it didn't take rocket science to figure out. And then, he's saying, of course, we had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, there's this $290 million settlement. So obviously, these banks were integral to what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. And they knew, according to these lawsuits, these banks, J.P. Morgan, Deutsche Bank, they knew exactly what Jeffrey Epstein was up to.
How do you think they were involved?
Well, I think that some of the executives in those banks, like Jess Staley, I mean, were involved in Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile network. And
why are they going? I guess what
and Diamond too.
I'm kind of. I mean, it's so if they sued J.P. Morgan and not the individuals. How was J.P. Morgan as a company involved in the Jeffrey Epstein, sex trafficking ring, rather than just the key players that were? I mean, do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah,
why wouldn't they go after the key individuals? And why did they go after the company, J.P. Morgan?
Well, the argument that they made was that J.P. Morgan was cognizant of Jeffrey Epstein trafficking children and gave him the money to facilitate it. They gave him money to do other things, but with the money that J.P. Morgan gave Jeffrey Epstein, that facilitated his child trafficking.
I mean, do you think this was a protection? Were they protecting certain people's identity by putting it into the company?
Absolutely, Jess Staley and Diamond. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, it's pretty obvious that when you look into them, they were involved with Jeffrey Epstein.
How were they involved?
I think that they were probably involved in molesting young girls. I mean, that's my surmise on that. And according to internal documents that were that the lawyers for the Epstein victims were able to acquire, J.P. Morgan definitely knew what Jeffrey Epstein was up to. Now, how would J.P. Morgan know that unless some of those executives were taking part in it? I mean, it doesn't make any sense that J.P. Morgan would not know about it. So if those individuals, like I've just named, weren't involved with Jeffrey Epstein.
Were those names involved in the lawsuit? Were they mentioned in the lawsuit?
They were mentioned, yes.
Okay.
But it wasn't explicit. But they were mentioned, yeah. And then Deutsche Bank is also the same type of thing. They were aware of Jeffrey Epstein, and they're going to give up millions of dollars too. I think they're only going to give up $75 million.
That's it?
Yeah.
How many victims is this going to be dispersed to?
We don't. I don't really know those numbers yet. But there's multiple tragedies here. But one of the major tragedies is $290 million isn't even going to dent J.P. Morgan.
I'm well aware. I totally agree with you. That's nothing.
I mean, it's like you or me getting like a parking ticket.
Yeah.
So that's a tragedy. It's a tragedy that those executives were molesting these girls.